Hello and welcome to Media7, and a special welcome to those of you watching us on the Sky TV platform. We're recording before a live audience at Auckland's Classic Comedy Club. In this week's show, we'll test the health of the local magazine trade, and the women's magazines in particular, and analyse what seems set to be a lucrative posthumous career for the King of Pop. But first, we turn to broadband. Such an easy word to say, such a difficult concept to realise. The sheer ambition of the National Party's plan to wire the country with ultra-fast broadband was part of the party's branding in last year's election campaign. And a year ago, John Key made a particularly ambitious promise to Waitara High School students.
Key says National will install super-fast internet that will allow them to download movies in 7 seconds. Appealing, Key urged the students to join his Facebook or Bebo pages. One Year 13 boy told 3 News that was patronising and that he should stick to his own age group.
John Key there in the pre-Twitter age. The broadband plan is still with us, albeit without its original champion, Maurice Williamson, and in a significantly different form to the one the party campaigned on. But the only news in the recent speech by Communications Minister Stephen Joyce was that we'd have to wait. The final plan, due in May, now won't be done until August. Moreover, the big industry players don't seem to like what they see. The centrepiece of the former Labour government's policy, unbundling Telecom's network, doesn't seem to be travelling well either, with both Vodafone and Orcon reacting angrily to a new Commerce Commission decision on access pricing. So, 10 years this week since the launch of Telecom's first broadband residential internet service, just where are we? We asked the Minister to join us, but his office said he had other business and pointed us to his speech and the discussion paper released in March. So, with us now on the panel are Computer World editor Rob O'Neill and Orcon CEO Scott Bartlett. We did also invite Telecom, but the company proved unable to choose a spokesman. It's a communications strategy, apparently. But welcome to you two gentlemen anyway.
Thanks, Rob.
Now, Rob, you've been quite positive about the government's fibre plan. Is it the ambition of it that's appealed to you?
Yeah, I mean, the ambition is great. I mean, I think we've made a lot of progress in the last 3 or 4 years. The Labor government really did get to grips with this problem, introduced new regulation, forced the unbundling of the local loop, and that's been very positive, a very positive thing. But we now have to take the next step, which is to introduce fibre and really build a decent network that's going to take us for the next 20 or 30 years. So yeah, I'm positive about the vision. The complications around that vision are really complex.
And it does seem complex, doesn't it? As I mentioned, we've already seen quite a significant change from... But before the election, Maurice Williamson was talking about one great big monolithic monopoly provider called FibreCo.
Right.
Now we're talking about maybe a couple of dozen regional companies that the government will go into business with as a joint venture to build local networks. What did you make of that change? Was it the right thing to do?
Well, the government came out with that plan. I think it was 25 local areas where you would compete for running the network in those areas and building the network in those areas. Now that's all well and good, but one of the sub-clauses in the document was, hey, we're open to other suggestions. So they now have a couple of other suggestions on the table from Telecom and Vodafone, which kind of go back to Maurice Williamson's FibreCo.
They do, don't they?
Yeah.
Because Vodafone wants the big monolithic FibreCo provider. Right. I think they even used that word.
They do. They use the FibreCo word, yeah.
And Telecom now wants Chorus, which is because Telecom has been split up as well operationally, wants Chorus, the network division, to be part of this as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Is that going to work?
Well, the problem is you have to involve Telecom in whatever you're going to do because Telecom owns the network, right? So I can't help thinking that the answer to this is to separate Telecom's Chorus division, get them to become the FibreCo, if you like, and allow open access to that network.
Right, so it becomes that whole network, by some means, which is yet undefined,
right,
is removed from Telecom by agreement and becomes part of this.
Vodafone's suggestion has all sorts of complications in it. Everybody puts their fibre assets into one company, and yet nobody has majority shareholding in that company. But Telecom would have to have majority shareholding in that company if it was based on the value of their fibre assets. So you're going down lots of dark alleyways.
It sounds like something that's going to take years to sort out.
I think the separation of Chorus is actually the cleanest way to go about it.
Right. Scott, what do you make of the plan? Do you like the ambition too?
Oh, for starters, the ambition's fantastic. It's it was a key election pledge. Here we are trying to work out the details. But the devil is in the details on this one, and that's the key point here. You know, who's going to lay the fibre, who's going to own it, what do we do with telecom, what do we do with everyone else? Yeah, there's a lot of issues here that need to be worked out. You know, but for me, I guess I'm waiting to see answers to the questions around, well, what's the end game? What does it mean for our economy? What does it mean for our society? How, you know, what are the social and economic dividends we want to get from this? And then work backwards from there to devise a plan which is going to deliver them, you know. And I think that's the part which is still to be nutted out.
It's the what's it for question, isn't it?
That's exactly right.
It's a great idea to build it, but what for?
Well, I mean, I'm a taxpayer just like you are, and, you know, we're tipping $1.5 billion of our cash into this thing. I want to know it's going to be well spent. I want to know it's going to make a better New Zealand. And, you know, we've got to get that answer before we get into the detail of what roads are we going to dig up, what are we going to do with telecom and chorus. They're important issues, but let's answer some of those other ones first. And, you know, I don't know if you've seen the Digital Britain report, which came out just a few days ago. You know, I'm not surprised that, you know, we've got the minister saying there's a couple of month delay on this one. You know, because they're probably sitting down, taking stock of what, you know, what the governments are doing in the UK, what's happening in South Korea, Japan, Australia. We're not the only country which is talking about nationalising our broadband assets.
Now, as Rob noted, broadband performance, for all that we moan about it, has actually improved markedly in the last, say, 5 years, particularly with unbundling. I live in a suburb where, thanks to Telecom's new cabinets, our service has gone from almost non-existent to actually quite fast. You're not happy with the way things are going, though, particularly with the Commerce Commission decision. I mean, convince me that you wouldn't have complained whatever the Commerce Commission have said.
Well, I mean, you know, for starters, it comes down to the first principle is cabinets, good or bad, great, fantastic things. You know, broadband, we all need it. We all need it to be better because, quite frankly, it's been bloody terrible. The second point is, you know, would have you just moaned on whatever the Commission came out with? Well, of course not, you know. But when, you know, if the Commission comes out with a determination that says these new shiny cabinets are going in the street, we're going to set up a framework that allows access seekers or competitors other than
access
telecoms
seekers being people who want to put their gear in
people like
Telecom's
Orcon,
cabinets.
people like Vodafone, people like Telstra Clear that want to come along, invest a buck and start to provide a competitive service. You know, if they set that framework up that allows that, then we're not going to complain. We're going to be in like fluent, you know, making that investment. But when the Commission comes out and says that in order to be able to invest in those cabinets, you need to have half the market. Just one company needs to have half the market to get into that cabinet, then that just doesn't seem like a very sensible approach to me. Why is that so important? And this is the part which I think people sometimes struggle with, but it's really quite simple. Fibre to the home, fibre to the business, your school, your hospital, whatever it is going to be, it's going to be 10 years before that project's completed, right? What's going to happen in the interim? These cabinets are important, competition is thoroughly important, and all the improvements that we've seen in price, you know, prices come down a lot, performance, and service have been driven through competition. It'd be a real shame, it'd be a crime to see that come to an end.
What do you make of this, Rob? Because we used to work together and we wrote these stories about the Commerce Commission making decisions about telecommunications. I'm getting a very strong sense of deja vu here.
Yeah,
is there a way through this?
Yeah, there is a way through it. I mean, but you can also look around the world and see the mess that has been made of it in other countries. I mean, like in Australia, I mean, they really have had trouble making headway on this, and they took a change of government and a change of approach, which maybe will produce the results. And I think it's very important that whatever happens, that you get a consensus in the industry, because Telecom could play very hardball on this. They do own the fibre assets, and if they're not on side on whatever the outcome is, then you're going to have trouble. You're going to have overbuilding, you're going to have inefficiency, you're going to have stranded assets, you're going to have all the stuff that the government's trying to avoid. So it is very important that we get this right.
The one thing that the government has indicated it's not doing is investing in a new international cable. So we're stuck basically with one pipe into the country. Do you think that was a mistake?
Yeah, I think it was a mistake. I think it's also interesting that Maurice Williamson was a big advocate of that cable. In one comment, I think, on one show, he said it sounded like a great investment.
He said a few rash things last year, though, I felt.
He did, yeah,
I mean, I think that there's a big difference with Stephen Joyce. He seems canny and only speaks when he has to.
With him.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But he's got a very big in tray at the moment. So.
Now, Scott, one thing we saw this week was Sky TV ditching its on-demand service over the internet because it was blowing people's monthly data caps, and in providing a service they were just annoying people and running them out of internet. You zero rate that data at Orcon, don't you? Which means it doesn't go towards the data cap. Why can you do that and say Telecom can't?
We all have to live with data caps in this country, partly because of that. We've only got one cable for the for the bandwidth for international websites, that's a real problem. So consequently, our prices are really high to get access to the rest of the world. But when the content's within the country, like TVNZ's is, this show's going out on the web. It's going to be sitting on servers inside TVNZ's building, which is only across the bridge from where our data centre is. It doesn't cost much to connect it up and distribute it around. I understand why Sky made that decision. I really do, because for them, they can't serve that content themselves through to the telecom network without paying an absolute bucket load to telecom to do it. They don't want to serve it out from overseas because the service is terrible, and so customers won't be complaining about their blown data caps. They're going to be complaining that their service doesn't work.
This is an interesting thing, isn't it? If you're a telecom customer, if you're on their network and you're looking at a video on the TVNZ On Demand site, that's being served from California.
That's right.
Because telecom wants to charge anyone who wants to deliver content to their customers more for the privilege.
Well, to wrap some numbers around this.
How do we get through that? Because it looks almost impossible to regulate for governments.
Well, I think New Zealand's proven nothing's impossible to regulate, but regulation is obviously always it should be it's a blunt sword, right? It's a really blunt instrument. It should be the last thing that we do. But let's face it, when you've got a monopolist or a business which has typically acted like a monopolist in a number of areas, sitting there making decisions and really holding most of the strings, then you kind of get stuck, right? Now, to be fair to telecom, and I do try to be sometimes, they've come out with a pairing initiative, but to get access to it, TVNZ would need to build out to 29 sites across the country. That's outside of the realms of possibility and capability for most hosting providers, right? So the real problem here is one of just commercial dominance. And to wrap some numbers around that, when you've got, you go to the United States, you look at ISPs in the States, you look at ISPs in Europe, they pay $10 per megabit to get access to everything else. Here it's 160.
I run a New Zealand website that is hosted in California because we can't afford to host locally. Mm-hmm. This is another problem, Rob, isn't it? Unbundling, it seemed, took a long time to bear fruit, but it did in the end. Are you hopeful that the issues that we've talked about tonight will be of a similar nature, that they will get worked out? Yeah,
I mean, unbundling still has its troubles, of course, with this cabinetisation and access for access seekers. So that's still an issue. But I mean, I think I kind of differ a little bit from Scott in the sense that yes, regulation is a blunt instrument, but it's actually served us pretty well. Without that regulation, we wouldn't have that cabinetisation, we wouldn't have that local loop unbundling. And really, most of what Scott complains about isn't so much the regulation; it's the pricing that's been set in those regulations. So. I think the regulation has been very effective in creating competition, and we need to have regulation to create competition because we're working in a monopoly environment.
So is My Home Internet going to get faster and cheaper next year?
It's going to get faster. I don't know about cheaper. I mean, the fibre actually could make it more expensive. I mean, that's the other dilemma of this equation, is that if people don't adopt that fibre network wholesale, it could be very expensive to use. If people are quite happy with ADSL2 for the next 5 years, it's going to be a very expensive fibre network.
It was interesting that Maurice Williamson was talking about Verizon's big fibre program. They were planning on getting back $200 US a month per household.
Yes,
that's not going to happen in New Zealand, is it? No one's going to pay that.
No, and there is talk, you can hear hints in some of these big telecommunications conferences that people will be forced or will be pushed off the ADSL network at some point. So it'll be almost like the digital crossover in television, where it just gets switched off.
Well, I, for one, because our program is available online, hope it does all get worked out. Rob and Scott, thank you for your time. And that does conclude this discussion. And after the break, we move into very different territory, the mag trade.